great pleasure of inviting a friend and also an epic educator on stage. She's travelled a little bit further to join us. Can we please make welcome Laura McBain? We're also going to make ourselves comfortable, if that's okay. The stools seemed a little bit, serious. Welcome to Australia. Cheers. Laura, I'd love to start by asking you, obviously we've heard from a couple of people before, and Dan had that provocation around, what's in your hand and what are you passionate about. For those in the room that maybe aren't that familiar with your journey and who you are, tell us a little bit about you and how you came to be here.
Thank you. First, I just want to thank you all for inviting me to speak. I myself am a teacher, facilitator, principal, and I've spent the last 15 some odd years really thinking about how do we really create equitable learning experiences. I was really resonating with the chat that Rosie and Dan give, and also thinking about what do I do every single day as an educator in a classroom to not only provide opportunities for students, but to see them and to really see who they are and the potential the exponential potential that they have as individuals and as human beings in this world. And so I've been blessed over the last lot of different opportunities I was a founding teacher of High Tech High, which is a school in Southern California. We operate 13 schools. I helped found our graduate school of education, which is pretty radical to have a graduate school inside of a high school. And so I worked there. And then up until about a year ago, literally, I think last year when I was visiting, I was starting a new job. And so I'm about 1 year into, I run the Stanford K-12 lab at the Stanford D School. And so my work now is really thinking about how do we really design and redesign education to really advance equity and to really think about what are the opportunity gaps that exist in the world, particularly for students who are furthest from opportunity. So I've been a teacher, I've been a principal, I'm a designer, and I'm really playing in this world of what do we as teachers need to do to really show up every day for our kids and really think about what system change, but also what we can do tomorrow to kind of start small, to really start making these really epic opportunities happen for kids.
Yeah, amazing. Who in the room is familiar with High Tech High or most likely to succeed? Just sort of throw up your hand. Amazing.
Cool.
High Tech High is often sort of touted as a project-based learning school. And I'd love for you to talk us through what a day in the life of a High Tech High student looks like. And is it all PBL all day long in every classroom from every teacher? What does that experience look like for young people in schools like that?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think often, I used to, when I was working at High Tech High this past year, people come to visit and they're like, oh, I just want to learn how to do projects. I got to learn how to do these projects because my kids need to build businesses and I'm going to do this type of work. And really they miss the core essential piece of it, which is really the whole school is really an equity experiment. And the purpose is to create learning experiences for kids. And that looks different. Right now, when we started, we had 30 staff members that we fit literally in this space. And we have 640 teachers now that are designing experiences. And really at the core of their work, it's on equity. And so the day looks differently in every classroom. But the core, if they go from a humanities classroom, it's interdisciplinary, it's transdisciplinary, they're working on projects. They might go to a maths class, but all of the learning that they're doing from 9 to 3 is designed around this why. Why am I doing this work? So of course they're doing projects. Of course they're doing stuff with their peers. They're in dialogue, but the essential core of the learning is that it's integrated around a why. Why do I need to know this? Who's going to see my work? And what am I going to do with this after I leave school? Integrated, and the type of pedagogy that we use every day differs. There's some traditional times for storytelling, like we're doing now, right? And there's time to create stuff. And there's time for reflection. And that looks different based on the time that you are in the project. And so we use all types of pedagogical practices to make sure that the product and the projects that we're creating alongside kids are beautiful, intentioned, and purposeful.
Amazing. I want to circle back, like you were talking about, obviously, the idea of those projects and where they're going to be shown. So what's the purpose of them? Can you maybe walk us through a couple of really epic examples that you've got of really great examples of projects that maybe have a purpose beyond the four walls of the classroom?
Yeah, one of my friends here, her daughter just did an amazing project where they went on the Colorado River. And they did a transdisciplinary project looking at innovation, sustainability, and actually producing and understanding what's happening with the Colorado River. For those of you who are unfamiliar with California, we're in a massive drought right now, and so sustainability is a problem. And so it's a challenge that we're facing. And so this project actually took them out into the field for 3 to 4 weeks, navigating the Colorado River, creating and actually doing water testing to figure out how do we solve this water sustainability problem, because it's a real problem within our community. And they went and do a project that's bigger than themselves, right? But then there's projects that can be, we might not solve the water drought problem in California, right? There might be a smaller project. And some of those really are around, the ultimate thing I often see is that we have opportunities to create audiences. And so I've seen some beautiful exhibitions where students are creating physics projects that's being produced and curated at the local art museum, where they're showing a roller coaster, they're showing an art project that integrates math, and that becomes an art exhibition so that students can see themselves as artists and mathematicians at once because they're exhibiting their work in an art museum that's a math project. Right? It's the integration of those subjects that happen. And then I think one of the projects I was sharing, I think the other day when we were chatting, was one of my favorite projects is an early years project. When we were building a school down in our southern area, which is right on the border of Mexico, it was this beautiful valley, and the school got built on top of this empty, beautiful ecosystem. And so for those of you, how many people are biology folks in this space? Great. So you'll understand this. When you disrupt an ecosystem, right, there actually are living organisms that live in that ecosystem. And when you build something on top of it, right, it changes the ecosystem. So when the school started, there were little wonderful creatures running through the school because they were now disrupted in their ecosystem. So mice, rats, snakes, because that's where they lived. And now there's a school there. So what do we do? And so these young students, age 6 to 7, decided that they wanted to solve this problem. They had a need, which was visceral, is there's rats running around their classroom. And so their teacher realized that this is such a unique opportunity not to jump into, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Let's call the pest people and solve this. This is a real sustainability problem. What do we do about this? And so they did an amazing design project where they asked the students, how do we solve this problem? And they went down to the path of who are the predators of mice and snakes, and what do we want to do about it? What's the best way to get rid of this problem? So they ideated, they interviewed ecologists, biologists, looked at examples, and they ended with owl boxes because they realized that owls are a primary predator for mice. So these owl boxes now exist right outside the school to protect the students from these wonderful creatures, right? And so you see these young 6 and 7 students that are building prototypes, but also see that their project not only had an impact for their community, but it also protects them, right? So it can start small, but also have a large impact because they get to see that experience and the impact of their work every single day.
That's amazing. And I love the examples from the early years particularly because I think sometimes it's really easy to get caught up in, this style of learning is really easy if you've got sort of 16-year-olds or 17-year-olds because they're more independent learners and therefore it suits them better. And so I want to sort of jump on that notion. When working with educators around the country, the question that we often get is, it's really great if you're in an amazing school with lots of resources and older students, but project-based learning or that style of pedagogy doesn't work for everyone. And I've heard the word equity come up a lot in just in the brief time we've been talking today. So how do you marry those two things together, this pedagogical approach and equity in education?
I mean, I think that one is that when we're doing really progressive education, whether it's hands-on design work, project work, inquiry work, really our purpose is who are we really going to impact at the end of the day and who needs this most? I often think about students that are furthest from opportunity, and I've got lots of experiences. I know Aaron visited a wonderful school in Chicago that I worked with for years. That's in the south side of Chicago. And one of the projects that they did, and for those who don't know Chicago, it's a pretty brutal area. There's about 400 students in this school. They are predominantly students of color. They're first generation, which means their parents never went to high school, and they're all low income. And so when they go to school in this south side, they have to take what they call a safe passage, which means they have to walk to school with someone from their school so that they don't get injured or shot on the way to school. It's a real problem. And I can tell you multiple cases of places around the country in the US, and that's a whole different conversation, about how do you create opportunities for kids in safe zones. And so one of the beautiful things that I saw witness in this school was bringing this experience to them. And the two things happened. We did some amazing physics projects where they combined physics and sound and looked at their words and studied what their words looked on a sound wave, and then illustrated that, and then recorded that, and then created an installation piece that went across the school that looked like the power of their own voice. For students that are marginalized in the US and they don't think they have a voice, that project alone actually got them to see the power of their own voice, not only from a visual sense, but a physics sense, which is very cool. But that project in and of itself came from an opportunity. There are lots of other opportunities in that school. I think one that I think is really beautiful is as we think about students that are coming from challenging backgrounds, there was another one where the students who are in grade 10, they wrote a story about the end of childhood. And they wrote vignettes. And one of my favorite vignettes was from a child who, on their way to school, they were having violence in their neighborhood, and their mother told them to not go down this road, but take the other road. And of course, as students do, and young people, they didn't listen to their parents. And on that way to school, her brother was shot. And so this project, this storytelling project, became an opportunity for this child to actually tell that story, to unpack that story as a healing journey. She's a published author now, right? Her book is out on Amazon. You can buy it. All the other kids' stories are out there. And so when I think about why we do this work, whether it's students who are experiencing trauma because of marginalization or because their parents are just busy because they're traveling and they're not home, it's how do we create opportunities for students to develop their voice and agency? Because what I heard from Rosie and Dan and their stories is at the end of the day, we're trying to create these micro moments for students to find their voice, to discover who they are. Whether it's a writer, an artist, a physicist, an entrepreneur, all these things, these micro moments that we have as classroom teachers, right, are the opportunities for them to discover themselves. And we use projects as a way for those moments to uncover, to see them. When they get to step into a place that's uncomfortable, a thing they've never done before, those are why we do those projects, because they get to see themselves for the first time.
Yeah, so I want to draw out a little bit more of that. Now, when we talk about those micro moments and the power of creating that moment of connection for a young person in the classroom, what do you think is maybe the key ingredients for creating those micro moments?
That's a great question. I think the simplest way to stand it is we often think about creating safe spaces for schools, right? For students to have opportunities to take risk-taking. And I think we have to push ourselves a little bit farther and think about brave spaces. How are we creating opportunities in schools for students to be brave? It's not enough for us anymore to think, oh, I'm going to make sure that they feel comfortable all the time and they feel loved and cared, because we have to do that. But we also have to be brave, which means we have to challenge our own perceptions about ourselves as educators, what we're really good at, and then also allow our students to feel brave, which means going out in the community. Right? That's how you actually create entrepreneurs, is that they have to fail a lot. And through that failure, they get braver and braver to try new things. And that comes when a student asks you a crazy question and they're like, oh, I want to try this, and I have this other idea. We as educators have to be brave enough to say yes. And we have to say yes and yes, I'm going to find you some money, and yes, I'm going to bring in, see these great people to help you. We have to be brave enough to let our vision of what we think they're supposed to do, and let them vision come true. And that means we have to really be brave as educators to release ourselves from control, right? And let them shine.
Cool, so I'm feeling brave, and I want to release control and create these amazing, epic experiences. And I'm sitting in the room right now, and I'm nodding, and I'm saying, this is amazing, and I want to do this. Twofold question. Where do you start? And how do you manage to overcome maybe some of the barriers of the system around assessment and reporting and all the rest of it that maybe seems a little bit too high and too hard?
So that kind of leads to some of the new work that I'm working on right now. I run a program called School Retool. We were just today with my friend Sarah, and she's from the United States as well, and we were talking about mindset. And I think one of the things that I think is a danger, especially when we're trying here, is that, we see these massive projects, and then we're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to create a company, and it's going to get funded, I'm going to have a helicopter, and then I'm going to be on stage. Like, we go to this space, right?
Wait, that's not going to happen?
Yeah, that's exactly what happens, yeah. And I like to think about what we think about with small changes. Right? What are in our program, we call them hacks. But what are the small steps that you can take to actually start to feel brave? So if you're going to give a worksheet, what would it look like if you just turned it in a Socratic seminar? If you were going to, instead of having them turn in a test, what would it look like if they all had to do a hip hop performance, right? If you had to think about what would be a needs-finding exercise for them and having them go into their community, what would it look like if you just said, go out right now and have everyone ask a question of people that you don't know? These small moments, whatever the project is, however you want to get started, I don't think about them as these 10-week massive things. They're small. That's how you get started, is you identify what is the smallest step I can take tomorrow that's going to get me started, not because I'm going to get the helicopter, which would be amazing and cool. I want to talk to Dan about that. But also is because we use them as opportunities for learning. In design work, we call these moments for insight, right? We're designing prototypes to actually learn more, not just to build this next big thing. And so I actually would push us all in this space to think about how are we designing learning experiences, and that means we're prototyping really crafty, scrappy, little small things in our classroom every single day to learn about how to get brave. And I think that's where we start.
Cool. And then overcoming some of those barriers around assessment and reporting, how do you marry up some of the demands of the system with trying to be brave and do new things?
We were talking, I think, about this yesterday, and we were thinking about all of us as innovators in this space. I think we have a responsibility to really document, not to really do both. It's a yes and. We don't get to choose sometimes. When I was talking to my friend Sarah, I mentioned at the very end, I said, the department here, they could just be really brave and cancel marking for a month for every educator. That's what I recommended to them. I said, well, could you just do that?
Did they say yes straight away?
Their eyes went whoa. I was like, whoa, that's crazy. So I think, but we in this innovation space, we have to be able to document our projects, do the assessments that they're asking of, but that's not enough, right? We have to be able to walk both lines and show our work in performance-based assessment, traditional assessment, because we're really, as innovators and doing this space, it is our responsibility to lay the path for the people that come after us and to show how we got there so that we can create more space for others. And so we have to be able to play both sides, navigate the ambiguity. My friend Lynn's over there, you're going to hear, and she gets it, back and forth. That's our job as innovators, is to figure out what the system is asking us to do and how do we navigate through that in such a way that others can follow us along the way.
I feel like we all do what we do because we want really great things for the young people that we work with. Maybe can you tell us a story about how the style of learning and the pedagogy and the approach that we've talked around about equitable education and these micro moments, maybe an impact that's had on a young person?
Yeah, I've had a few, and I'm sure all of us in this room, right, have many opportunities when we decide to lean in to discomfort with our kids, and when we can pull back and think, I'm just going to play the safe choice. One of my students, I will not say her name, but when she was an 11th grade student, we have this wonderful program where our students do an academic internship, right? So they actually go out and work in the world, and they're doing it at age 16 for a semester. And so prior to that experience, she was hospitalized. She had attempted suicide, and we were emailing back and forth with her parents about whether we should send her on this academic internship that we had asked and created for her. She had wanted to go teach in a school in Canada for a semester. So I, as an educator who's a caring person, was really scared, because here's my student who is coming from a lot of trauma right now. Her parents will be 3,000 miles away. And what do we do in this moment? Do we send her, or do we create something closer to home where we can make sure she's all right? And after conversations with her parents, we said, nope, she's going to do it, because that was the moment for her. She felt like there was something she was looking forward to. It scared me to death Because here's my student 3,000 miles away, and I can't watch them. I can't make sure they're okay every day. And she ended up doing it. And then she did successful. She saw herself in a new way. She's now a teacher. She's graduated, right? And I ran into her at the airport randomly, and she was going off to the UK to do an internship and do something else. And so that's the micro moments we're talking about. I could have chosen, like, no, let's keep her close to home. Let's have her go work at a little Staples down the road, and we'll have her do that. But we had to be brave enough to trust that she's going to be okay and let her navigate that space and be there when she needs us, right? To be there when, to give the phone calls, to call up and say, how you doing? How are you going to navigate this? When you're having a low moment, what do we need to do for you? And that's really scary as educators because we have young human beings and we want to care for them and love them and show that we're there for them. But we have to be brave enough to let them release themselves into the world and then be there when they need us.
Amazing. Can we please thank Laura McBain for her time?